Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss village and village studies. Or when we talk about the village, the different things that come to our mind in the joint family, caste, power structure, rituals, community work. There are so many things, but when we try to understand over the period of time, we find a distinct change. So there the question arises: what is the significance of village study? And it's being used as a sociological tool widely, and people are trying to understand the Indian villages or how it is metamorphized and what are the important aspects of the Indian villages. So in today's lecture we will try to understand these aspects, and for discussion on this very topic we have in a studio senior academician Dr. Subhas Mahapatra. He teaches sociology in Delhi University, and in last 30 years he has contributed in many ways to sociology and sociological issue discussion, and he has written 3 books on the different issues of sociology. So on your behalf I welcome him for the EduSet lecture and request him to make us clear what is the significance of village and village studies. On your behalf I welcome him. Welcome.
Thank you Mr. Kumar. I am very happy that I am deliberating on a topic which carries contemporary significance. When this new government has assumed responsibility, it has given credence on the domain of rural development. It is generally felt that India lives in villages. Prosperity of India, progress of India, development of India cannot be possible without the development of the villages. When you speak of poverty, intensity of poverty is extremely high in case of Indian villages. If one speaks about unemployment, disguised unemployment, casteism, one finds out all these problems do have a strong rural base. The basic concern of the governance system of the day is to minimize social problems and maximize social inclusion by accelerating plans and programs pertaining to rural development. Over the years, one finds out many initiatives are taken by the government, like Mahatma Gandhi Narega program, rise of self-help groups, expansion of cooperative programs, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. So all these kinds of programs initiated by the state, it's trying to guarantee livelihood to the people, those who are living in the countryside. Panchayati Raj institution is also a landmark through which it is emphasized that micro-politics should be connected to macro-democracy of Indian society. So therefore, one finds out the basic objective of the state policy has been to establish interlinkage between micro community of Indian villages with macro society of India. Keeping this idea in the forefront, let me just divide my lecture into 2 parts. What is village and how sociologists reflect on the village. And in relation to that, I will be discussing about how village study was introduced into the domain of sociology as an alternative methodology, questioning to early approaches to study Indian society, may that be Indological approach or cultural approach, and Marxist approach. So village study in the domain of sociology is used as a methodology giving space for the rise of sociology in India, and how different sociologists are looking at a village, using village study as a methodology or questioning to this particular kind of methodology and giving alternate paradigms to it. We will be discussing that in the first part of the lecture. In the second part of the lecture, we will be discussing about how village study has given us certain kind of input to understand the dynamics of caste, caste mobility, caste conflict, and changing nature of caste. How village studies have given us some kind of input to make sense of social transformation of kinship and family in India. How village studies are giving us some kind of understanding about class formation in rural India, redistribution of land, and how class conflict is getting intensified in India. And how some sociologists are going to the extent of developing interrelationship between village study and different kinds of mobilization and protest among the farmers and peasants in the country. And how some other village studies are talking about the rise of political awareness among the people, political mobilization among them, contest for power, new form of domination beyond caste and kinship line, how traditional domination and modern form of domination are engaged in contest and conflict. Therefore, economic change in India, political transformation in India, dynamic nature of caste, we can make sense of looking into village studies conducted by different sociologists. In contemporary context, village study is reflecting on the working of different plans and programs initiated by the state. Through village study, we are getting inputs about, informations about the success story of Seva, Susan Wadley, how self-help groups are coming up, mobilizing people together, giving them certain kind of economic well-being, and establishing interlinkage between microeconomics of the village with macroeconomics of the society. Operation Flood and its consequence we get to know of through village studies. How sugar cooperative, seeds cooperative are empowering the peasant community in the countryside. Number of sociologists are reflecting on that and giving us sufficient input to make sociology of development a progressive subfield of Indian sociology today. Also, gender questions are addressed through village studies. What has been the status of women? How women are reflecting on the existential patriarchy? How women are asking for a kind of justice? Child's right. So all these kinds of issues, problems, we are getting to know of today by conducting village studies. And most important dimension to village study is also reflecting on, impact of green revolution on Indian villages. Some interesting studies are coming up now that indicates that how green revolution has given rise to employment of migrant laborers, their problems, their plights, their entitlements, persistent of bonded labor in disguise. So all these kinds of explanations we are getting through the conduct of village studies by sociologists. Also in past, some sociologists are looking into primary education. How the entire system of primary education is operating in the village. And there are interesting reflections are found out. How people belonging to different social class, community, their stake over education is differentiated. How people coming from privileged social background do have cultural capital at their disposal, using which they perpetuate their domination in the spectrum of education. And children belonging to deprived sections of the society, lacking cultural capital, are not achieving big success in the spectrum of education. Therefore, government may make education accessible, affordable, available to the people. But people belonging to different socio-cultural background do relate themselves differently with the educational curriculum. Therefore, education works to the advantage of advantaged, and it's not working for the upward mobility of socially disprivileged sections of the society. It is evident from the fact that dropout rates is always high in case of the deprived sections of the society. So through village studies we make sense of equality of education, how not resolving the persistence of inequality on the basis of culture, on the basis of caste, on the basis of gender persisting in case of village India. So therefore, to make sense of India, to get a kind of understanding about social transformation in India, it is imperative on part of sociology to reflect on village community where majority of the population of India they are living today. So village study in one form is giving rise to the introduction of new methodology, explaining social structure and contemporary questions, challenges, possibilities, problems are also addressed by the sociologist through village study. Therefore, I would not be considering that village study is the only method in Indian sociology. Therefore, there are limitations to village study which is highlighted by different sociologists. Alternatives to village study is being founded, but village study as a tradition, as a methodology is creating a space for itself within the domain of Indian sociology. So, this will be the overall framework of the lecture. So, I am making an attempt to explain first why village study, why it was introduced into the domain of sociology. If one looks into Indian sociology, we find out in the formative stage around 1920s, there was no department of sociology per se which was isolated from either from the Department of Economics, Political Science, Philosophy or History. So most of the departments of sociology which came first in University of Bombay or University of Calcutta, Lucknow. So in these universities, or Pune, in these universities, sociology was attached to either philosophy or ethics or Indology or history. And most of the early sociologists were making sense of Indian society referring to texts. Therefore, their early approach to Indian society was known as Indological approach to study India. Indological approach gives importance on the fact that India is integrated in terms of values. And these values, which are the essence of Indian culture, are present in all parts of the society, whether North India, South India, Eastern India and Western India. And these values gives a direction to life. And following this direction to life, people used to maintain discipline, regularity in their everyday social activities. If one looks into the writings of G.S. Ghure, if one looks into the writings of Katkar, writings of Mukherjee, then one finds out that the early Indologists were making a sense of unified India on the basis of common cultural consensus. Varna system, ashram system, transmigration of soul, and most importantly, different kinds of cultural texts, Sanskritic texts were interpreted. And on the basis of that, how consensus has evolved in India, that is being spelled out by the Indologist. And Indologists were glorifying the cultural tradition of India. And they are advocating that though society is going through change because of the initiatives of different kinds of rulers, the core values of Indian society stands constant. So therefore, despite administrative changes, technological changes, value consensus has taken place among the people of India, and that gave rise to persistence of Indian society. As an alternative to this kind of approach, Marxist approach developed in Indian sociology. And Marxist approach advocates that foundation to any society is the mode of production. When mode of production changes, production relationship changes. And corresponding to that, superstructural institutions also experience change. They look into the basic mode of production persistent in India, that was land and agriculture. So when mode of production was land and agriculture, it was controlled by everybody, technology was controlled by everybody, people are using their labor in the process of production. In ancient Indian society, one would not be finding out the class formation taking place. But subsequently, when kingship is established, revenue-free land is given to the Brahmins, tax collectors are appointed, officials are appointed, religious grants are given to the people, temples, charitable institutions are getting land grant from the state. So there one finds out leisure class is making appearance. Therefore, a group of people having ownership right over the land, they live in leisure. Others are primarily tilling the land, sweating it out to get productivity from out of the land, but they don't have right of ownership over the land or right to control the land. They have only right to use the land. And this kind of inequality gets intensified. So when Mughal rulers come to India, land is becoming the property of the state. State is guaranteeing land right to the people. So in ancient India, there is a dual ownership right over the land is present. King cannot, sever the entitlement rights of the farmers over land. He cannot evict farmers from the land so long as farmers are paying their rents. Therefore, partially farmers do have control over land, and also state is having control over land. But during Mughal period, one finds out different kinds of land tenure system is coming into prominence, and state right over the land precedes over the farmers and peasants right over the land. But this class character becomes intensive during British rule in India. Permanent settlement, introduction of zamindari, and most significantly, zamindars are given proprietary rights over land. And zamindars are paying tax in advance form or after the product to the state. Therefore, state is assured of return, but conditions of agriculture is not improved. Soil rotation is not taking place. Irrigation facility is not extended to the farmers. What in past was the responsibility of the state. Price of the product is falling sharply. And in many situations, because of the non-payment of tax due to crop failure, natural calamities, farmers are evicted from out of their land. And British was greatly engaged in de-industrialization process in India. Small industries, cottage industries, handicrafts are all demolished. Therefore, British is using India as a space to facilitate trade and commerce in search of economic benefits. Therefore, British land tenure policy, British forest policy, British industrial policy are always intending to give economic advantage to Britain at the cost of the people of India. In such a situation, tax collectors, money lenders, landlords, they are evolving into a kind of dominant class who are controlling the destiny of the masses. Therefore, class formation is giving rise to the growth of inequality in case of colonial India. Therefore, Marxist sociologists advocate that if one looks at Indian society, one would be noticing Indian middle class coming from affluent families who joined nationalist movement were greatly driven by their class genesis. So therefore, in case of India, one finds out farmers and peasants came together in search of their livelihood But ideology of independence, ideology for freedom is articulated by Indian middle class. So therefore one should be keeping this in mind, that social transformation in India was initiated by Indian middle class, who mobilized to masses who are suffering from hunger, poverty, illiteracy, so that after India's independence they can have access to their livelihood. Therefore, India should not be studied in terms of culture. India should be studied in terms of mode of production, class formation, class relationship, class mobilization, class contradictions, and on the basis of that, one should be looking into social transformation. So when these two traditions are dominant in Indian sociology, most of the sociologists were greatly driven by nationalistic tradition. India is one, unified, rich cultural heritage and history. Reform should be initiated in the domains which are standing on the way of progress of India. The other tradition, that is Marxist tradition, was not quite popular at that point of time. At this juncture in 1960s, an alternate approach to study India developed. And this alternate tradition to study India was initiated by Professor M. N. Srinivas. And this tradition is known as ethnographic tradition or field study tradition. And how that tradition became popular in India. Ethnographic tradition or field study tradition is introduced into the domain of social anthropology by A.R. Radcliffe Brown. Radcliffe Brown considers that the fundamental concern of social anthropology is to study social structure. And social structure is the product of the dynamic, continuous relationship among the individuals. And this dynamic relationship, interpersonal relationship, is the essence of different social institutions. For example, if one looks into family, continuous relationship between parents and children, relationship between husband and wife, relationship between siblings, that give rise to the persistence of the structure of family. Similarly, if one looks into religion, didaic relationship between the the priest and the performers give rise to the structure of religion. Therefore, whether you talk about caste, talk about mode of production, talk about kinship, talk about religion, there one finds out social actors are present. And actors negotiate themselves with other actors on a continuous basis, driven by different kinds of motives, driven by different kinds of values, as a result of which this continuous didaic relationship gives rise to the growth of structure. Therefore, sociology should be emphasizing on structure study. Structure do have a life. Therefore, family structure one talks about, agricultural structure one talks about, Hindu social structure one talks about. Structure is not imagined. Structure can be subjected to empirical investigation. So, A.R. Radcliffe Brown further tells that structure exists in different ways. One can look into structural units, structural forms, and morphological structure. So therefore, to study structure, you have to study roles, relationships. So these role relationships, which are continuous, giving rise to the growth of structure, have become the subject matter of sociology and social anthropology. Also, Radcliffe Brown gave importance on the study of totality with reference to tribal communities, which became quite popular in case of British anthropology. So he says a researcher must have to live for a prolonged period of time with a tribal community and study every aspect of their culture, and on the basis of that make sense of tribal society and the structural dynamics it is primarily experiencing. This tradition of A.R. Radcliffe Brown was similar to the tradition, field study tradition, that was introduced by Robert Redfield. Robert Redfield introduced field study tradition while studying a Mexican village. And going for this field study tradition, he came forward with the conclusion that society changes in different ways. The change one experiences in case of Mexican society will be different from that of change one is experiencing in the other urban communities. So, this tradition of primarily studying a particular community in every possible detail, initiated by A.R. Radcliffe Brown, subsequently taken up by Robert Redfield, largely influenced to Professor M.N. Srinivas. Srinivas, who was a contemporary and student of A.R. Radcliffe Brown, carried forward this methodology and applied that as an instrument to understand Indian society. So, for which he is being considered as the founder of field study tradition in India. He made a clear-cut distinction between book view and field view. I am giving you a certain kind of input about it, then we can make sense of how village study is giving rise to the growth of sociology. If one goes by book view, one finds out, as Indologist advocate, in Indian society one finds out there are present 4 Varna groups: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. And these 4 Varna groups are hierarchically arranged. There is a theological justification given to the position of each Varna. As a result of which, these 4 Varnas are maintaining hierarchy, but at the same time, different Varna groups are sharing common kind of ideology, for which India is becoming a land where inequality and integration are mutually coexistent. So, contradicting to this Varna view of Indian society, Srinivas tells that if we go to any village, we find out within every village there will be present roughly around 20 different caste groups. Also, one will be finding out in every village, Brahmins are not necessarily dominant. If in some villages we find out Brahminic domination is present, Brahmins may be dominant in the ritual sphere, but in economic and political sphere, other caste may be dominant. Therefore, ideological view of India, that India is a Brahminic society, where Brahminic domination is absolute, unquestionable, it's so different from field view of India. Therefore, make sense of India looking into what Indians actually do. Make sense of India by reflecting on, looking into interpersonal relationship among the people living within the village India. And if we go for field study to different villages, we will be finding out caste is not just asymmetrical system, hierarchical system. There has always been a kind of contest and conflict between different caste groups in search of superiority to equals. A potter and barber may be engaged in conflict with reference to who is superior than whom, and also caste those who are equal, but competing for superiority with each other, may demand equality with the superior caste. That means barbers and potters may proclaim that they are a part of Kshatriya community, Rajput community. So therefore, caste is not a primarily static system where hierarchies are spelled out in a distinctive way. Rather, different caste groups for differential purpose are engaged in conflict with each other. They go for various kinds of mobilization. They go for the modification of their cultural systems. Therefore, to understand the dynamics of caste, one has to shift from book view to field view, Varna-based understanding of Indian society to caste-based understanding of Indian society. From 1960s to 1970s, 75 to be very precise, 80s, most of the sociological studies concentrating on village studies focused on the dynamic nature of caste to indicate that Indian sociology should be going for structure functional analysis, use field study as a method, departing from early sociological tradition that may be Marxist approach to Indian society or Indological approach to Indian society. So therefore, one should be looking into a correspondence between village study as a kind of methodology introduced in sociology and growth and development of sociology. If Indology gave birth to Indian sociology, Marxist approach contributed for its development, and for its maturity, field study method, or for that matter empirical method, gave a kind of momentum to it. In today's context, people go for area studies, people go for community studies. So today's approach, or they go for primarily looking into the form of mobilization and protest taking place among the people. Therefore, village study, though not quite popular today, institutions are studied, mobilization are studied, protest and movements are studied, developmental plans are studied, to which village is not the central focus of attention. But still it is being realized that without village study tradition in Indian sociology, our progress and development could not have been so possible as we see it today. So, this is how the village study tradition was introduced in case of India, contributing for the growth and development of Indian sociology. Before I get into that, let me just analyze in brief how village is being conceptualized by the people, scholars, at different points of time in different ways. Study of village is not always a domain of sociology. If one looks into the study of Irfan Habib, one finds out he makes a brilliant analysis of land tenure system in case of medieval India, and make an explanation of Indian villages with reference to both economic system and political system persistent in case of medieval India. Many historians like Romilath Hopper, K.M. Panikkar, they look into Indian villages and how they are organized, present at different points of time during ancient Indian society. It is found out in Kautilya's Arthashastra, Ramayana and Mahabharata, that king had the jurisdiction of creating new villages. And king used to support certain specific groups of people in a particular village by giving them land grants. King used to appoint village officials to maintain law and order in the village, to primarily punish the people who are violating to rules. So therefore, villages were present in ancient India, we can call them as Janapadas, they are greatly present, or towns were present, villages were present, and in each village, people were looking after their own life, organizing the cultural activities, participating in productive activities, rituals. So therefore, village had a life of its own during ancient period. Medieval period also, villages didn't wait for big changes. In Babarnama, we find out mention of villages. Different travelers and missionaries coming to India, they are also, Al-Biruni you can talk about, making certain kind of description about villages. And most important finding about the village is that people carrying different kinds of occupations are present in the village. And people living within the village are engaged in exchange of skills, exchange of services with each other. And also there is a kind of important indication that people of the village establish trade relationship with the people living outside. Therefore, villages were not absolutely isolated units in economic sense of the term. So therefore, this kind of understanding, historical understanding of the villages indicate that much of change is not taking place in the villages, though in the macro structure of Indian society, political transformation is taking place. Similar views are also indicated by the colonial administrators and scholars. If one looks into Henry Mann, Munro, Metcalfe, O'Malley, Baden-Powell, all these British scholars, they had a great interest in the study of Indian villages. And most of them indicated that Indian villages are little republics, because every village had a kind of council present, Gram Sabhas present, and the members of Gram Sabha used to sit together to dispense justice, and they are known for their integrity, known for their capability to dispense justice. Therefore, these Gram Sabhas were playing multiple kinds of role: administrative role, legislative role, judicial roles. So reflecting on that, most of the colonial scholars indicated that village communities are little republics. And it was found out that villages are self-sufficient for two reasons. Most of the land belonging to the village was located within the territorial jurisdiction of the village. Also, it was found out that people of a village were engaged in different kinds of productive activities and exchanging their goods and services with each other, what is called as Jajmani relationship. Therefore, villages were economically self-sufficient. They were more or less politically autonomous, and most of the people living in the village didn't have much of concern about the political transformation taking place in the larger society or macro structure of the society. Therefore, it is spelled out that village communities are little republics, having everything in their own. They are self-sufficient, and rulers may come and rulers may go, but the basic structural character of the village stands unchanged. So from Munro to Metcalfe, all the colonial administrators, researchers developed a kind of imagination about village India, that villages are self-sufficient units, they are isolated, they are not linked up with larger society. So therefore, Indian villages are the classic example of Oriental social organization, which is so greatly different from the social organizations in case of West. This kind of view, colonial view about Indian villages, is also somehow reflected in the writings of Karl Marx, Asiatic mode of production. Karl Marx considers Indian villages, traditional Indian villages, don't provide much of space for progress and development. The biggest problem with village economy, what he calls as Asiatic mode of production, is that people make limited production, and all people are using their labor in the process of production. No technological advancement is taking place in society, and there is a contention to the needs of the people. Human needs are absolutely contented. As a result, chance and scope for acceleration of production is unfound in case of village India. Therefore, Indian villages are idyllic form of social organizations, where mode of production is primarily standing static. If mode of production develop dialectics, two classes do not come in opposition to each other, exploitation doesn't take place, then social progress, historical progress is never ever possible. In his latter writings, Marx talks about the fact that some kind of initiatives are taken by British to ensure that the static character of economy is no longer prevailing in case of village India. Deindustrialization process, introduction of zamindari system. So all these kinds of factors gave rise to class formation in case of village India. As a result of this class formation, capitalist mode of production came into prominence, and slowly Indians are getting conscious about the kind of exploitation coming out of the system of production. Therefore, without British technological innovation, dialectical relationship between different classes could not have been experienced by Indian villages. So when colonial view of static character of India is also reflected in the writings of Karl Marx, and Marx is considering that European rulers, colonial rulers, introduced class element into the mode of production. To its contrast, Mahatma Gandhi is holding a different view about Indian villages. Gandhiji considers that India lives in villages. Therefore, what we have to do is to evolve our democracy from the grassroots. Gandhiji believes if development is enforced on the people of the village, people may not be ready to carry it on. Therefore, he is giving importance on revivalism of Gram Sabhas. So, people should be sitting together, dispense justice, they should be articulating their needs, work on that, and state should be providing support to the people. Therefore, if village becomes politically autonomous, then democracy in India will be, democracy in case of India will be enforcive and intensive. Gandhiji gave importance on cooperative farming. If land is held by the people in common and collectively people participate in the system of production, then economic inequality can sufficiently be addressed. Gandhiji spoke about limit to needs. He says if people are self-sufficient and they put a limit to their needs, there will be no migration of the people from rural sector to urban sector. And people will be in a position to enhance their skills and use their skills in the local areas, contributing for social and economic development. So therefore, Gandhian ideology pertaining to Indian villages. Village is a land of peace, village is a land of cultural pluralism, village is a land of unity. Therefore, development of democracy should be taking place from the grassroots. So this vision of Mahatma Gandhi is again questioned by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Therefore, colonial view of Indian villages is different or somehow similar to Marxian view of Indian villages, but Marx tells that Indian villages must be demolished to bring in contradictions for the promotion of development progress of history. And these two views of Indian villages are so greatly different from Gandhian view of Indian villages. Dr. Ambedkar indicates that Indian villages are greatly responsible for injecting superstitions, casteism into the minds of the masses. Therefore, village is a den of superstitions, Brahminic colonialism. Therefore, it is the people of the village sitting together in this village sabhas, gram sabhas. They enforce different kinds of sanctions of others, lower caste, taking primarily guidelines from religion, guidelines from culture, or guidelines from traditional textual ideologies. Therefore, to make India democracy, to make India inclusive and equalitarian, we should make attempt that people get away from these conventional norms, values, traditions, and ideology. Therefore, don't glorify Indian history, glorify Indian village culture, and look forward how these cultural values guiding decision-making process in village India should be replaced by legitimate, equalitarian, inclusive values. Values of castelessness, classlessness. So therefore, Ambedkar said that if we have to improve India, we have to improve the condition of the people living in Indian villages. And most of the people living in inhuman condition in village India are mostly Dalits. Therefore, village should give space to Dalits to live with equality, with pride and dignity. Don't talk about equality in village when the higher castes are sitting together, dispensing justice and enforcing this justice on the subaltern groups in Indian society. So therefore, village India is perceived, analyzed, examined, explained differently by different individuals, people driven by different kinds of ideas. If one looks into sociology, when village study is introduced by M.N. Srinivas, this position that through villages we should make a sense of India is being questioned by Louis Dumont. Louis Dumont tells village is not a place where a researcher should go and make sense of difference in inter-caste relationship, system of family and kinship, from one village to another village. Village should be studied from a civilizational perspective in India. Civilizational perspective, it means that superficial differences one may see present in case of one village from that of another village. For instance, if Brahmins are dominant in one village, Jats are dominant in another village, Reddis are dominant in third village. These are superficial differences. But the core idea is Brahminic supremacy is present in the psychic consciousness of the people in case of Indian society. Therefore, every village is creating a kind of situation in the mindset of the people, in which one will be finding out all people do have respect for common values. All people carry the idea of distinction between purity and pollution. People across the country do have common sentimental attachment, emotive attachment with their villages. And all the people of a particular village are tilling the land located within the territorial boundary of the village. Therefore, he is using a concept called as village patriotism. Therefore, what you see in a village, that you see in India. Therefore, India lives in villages. Thus, the difference between one South Indian village and North Indian village is over-exaggerated by Indian sociologists. Therefore, heart and soul of village is connected to the heart and soul of the country and the nation. So, therefore, village and nation are interconnected to each other. So, this idea of Louis Dumont is giving credence to civilizational approach that stands different from M.N. Srinivas' significance, importance given on village studies. There is another tradition of village study introduced in Indian sociology by the students of Robert Redfield. They are Mackin Marriott and Milton Singer. They offer a kind of cultural explanation to village study. Srinivas gives a structure functional explanation to village study. Dumont and Pocock give a civilizational approach to village study. And Milton Singer, Mackin Marriott, they give cultural explanation to village study. Milton Singer tells Western culture cannot be compared with Eastern culture. Western culture is a form of secondary civilization and Indian culture is a form of primary civilization. Every civilization or society operates in two spheres. One is microsphere or little tradition sphere, other is macrosphere or the great tradition sphere. In case of India, one finds out the culture practiced by the people in the villages correspond with the culture people practice in the cities or in the urban centers. Therefore, elite culture and mass culture share strong degree of connectivity with each other, which is evident from the fact that to whom people worship in the villages, like great gods like Shiva, Shakti or Vishnu. So, the great gods and goddesses worshipped in the microstructure are also admired and worshipped in the macrostructure. The text and the themes people carry, read, follow, idealize in the villages, from different kinds of Sanskritic text like Purans, Samhitas, Upanishads, are also appreciated and internalized by the people who are the elites in India. So the perception of the people pertaining to what is moral, what is immoral in microstructure is identical to the perception of the people in macrostructure. Therefore, there is a strong kind of continuity between little tradition and great tradition, or elite culture and the mass culture in India. Therefore, since there is a kind of communication, negotiation, continuity between local culture and primarily societal elitistic culture, any element of change comes from outside, people develop skepticism towards it. Therefore, elites are resisting to change and masses are appreciating it. Therefore, social change in case of India is taking place in a limited way than taking place in absolutist manner. But in case of West, where secondary civilization is present, elites are not getting their cultural elements from the masses, local culture. Elites are liberal. Elites get their values from different societies. So they accept all possible kinds of elements of change. And these elements of change can easily be introduced into the grassroots. Therefore, European society can change fast. Indian society will go slow, because one is primarily secondary civilization, other is primary civilization. So therefore, village and cities in case of West, they stand opposite to each other. So what you see in the villages, that you don't see in the cities. On that, different scholars are reflecting in different ways. Tonis talks about Gemeinschaft versus Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft means community, Gesellschaft means society, modern society. Durkheim makes a distinction between mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. Linton makes a distinction between societies driven by status, standing different from societies driven by contract. Parsons makes a distinction between pattern variable A and pattern variable B. So therefore, Western scholarship, Western sociology is engaged in making a dichotomy between villages and cities in terms of structure, in terms of culture, and in terms of organizations. But in case of India, what one sees in the village, its advanced form, extended form, one finds out in cities. Therefore, there is a kind of continuity between villages and cities in Indian context. So, when we study village, we see external elements present in it. When you go to study urban centers, we find out rural elements are present in it. So, in different ways, sociologists are reflecting on village studies in India. I would be emphasizing here that introduction of village study on Indian society reflected on various aspects of Indian social life. Many village studies were conducted to explain dynamic nature of relationship within caste system. M.N. Srinivas talks about Sanskritization. He made a study on Rampura village where he is finding out two different kinds of dominations are present within caste. A Brahmin is enjoying ritual domination, whereas Vokalingas, they are enjoying secular domination. And when Brahmin is coming for favor to a peasant caste, he is paying respect to his secular position. When a Vokalinga person is coming to a Brahmin to offer rituals, he is paying respect to the ritual domination of Brahmins. So therefore hierarchical character of question, hierarchical character of caste in question is getting a new dimension here. Questioning to Indological approach or called the early approach, he tells, one caste is not there at the top. Rather, domination is primarily bifurcated into two structural parts. One is ritual, other is secular. The people are proclaiming secular domination are not challenging to ritual domination of another caste. Rather, both are paying mutual respect to each other. And once a particular caste is going for secular mobilization, it develops aspiration to improve his ritual standards. That's what he calls as Sanskritization. Also through this village study, he is finding out how different intermediary caste groups benefiting from Green Revolution, Panchayati Raj institution in different parts of the country have evolved into dominant caste. And these dominant castes are now capturing power. So therefore, dominant caste politics as a concept in political sociology is coming out of field study. Sanskritization and caste mobility as a contribution to sociology is coming out of this field study tradition. Another brilliant field study is conducted by Professor Andre Bete in his study of Sripuram village, where he is finding out village society stratified on the basis of caste, on the basis of class, and on the basis of power. And within caste, he is finding out how differences are present, how Brahmins are divided into different groups, Ayers and Iyengars. Their, dress is different, language is different, food behavior is different. Interrelationship of Brahmins with non-Brahmins is greatly spelled out. So therefore, stratification system of the village on the basis of caste, class and power is explained by Professor Andre Bete through his village study. How different caste groups are engaged in factional conflict with each other, that is analyzed in detail by Professor F.G. Bailey and Nicholas. Anand Chakraborty also make attempt to study Devisar village, where he is finding out how people are engaged in conflict with each other to win elections and to capture power. So therefore, different village studies we see are making reference about agrarian class structure, mobility in caste system, working of community development, changing status of women in different ways at different points of time. Therefore, village is a kind of universe that gives us empirical data using which we understand contradictions, conflict, negotiations taking place in various structural part of the society. I'll conclude by saying that David Mandelbaum rightly advocated to make sense of India, we must have to make sense of three important primordial institutions. One is caste, second is joint family, and third is village community. Village community encompass these two institutions. Therefore, without studying village, it is difficult for one to make sense of India.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Subhas Mahapatra, for giving such an insightful lecture on this very topic. I thank all of you for watching the lecture. So, and tomorrow we will have another lecture on this very topic, village studies. So, with this word we conclude and thank all of you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.